Yeah, we can.
Yeah. All right, I'll get started. All right. So hi everybody, welcome to UNSW Architecture Society's Photoshop workshop. Today's workshop is going to be focused on Photoshop's and the photography and presentation of physical models. I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm Ivy. I'm a third-year architecture student. So I'll be sharing my passion for model making and because I believe it's the most effective way of communicating your architectural ideas for studio. So why I think it's so important is that it shows your thinking, especially in the current situation of online classes. Being able to take photos and make them super nice for your tutor to see is really going to boost your marks and stuff, especially because you can't see them in real life. So today's workshop, I'll go through four main elements of physical models and the presentation of them. So the planning of those models, the photographing, the photoshopping, and then the presentation of it. And then at the end, I'll go through my workflow. I'll show you how I go from taking a photo and then presenting it in my final presentation. So before you even start, even before you make your model, you should think about what do you want to show from that model. What makes it so interesting, and why should your tutor be looking at this particular photo of the model? And for me, a good model isn't just very pretty; it shows lots of ideas and concepts. So things that you can show from this are the form, the size and scale, materials, usage of space, and also the context of your design. So what I mean by this is things like these. So what do you want to show in your model? So for example, in this first photo here, I've got like the relationship to context, as well as also the usage of this space, and also things like materiality. So you can show a very diverse range of ideas through just one picture. So some things to consider when you're photographing your model. Things like lighting, the background, positioning, and also the camera angles. And this is what really creates a very unique photo of your design. So I've included a few examples, some from myself and a few architectural studios in Sydney, as well as all the way around the world. So you can see how they use different types of lighting, like diffused and direct lighting, natural lighting, or artificial lighting. So for example, this one here is my 2 a.m. Artificial lighting the night before it was due. And then you also have some very beautiful daylight shots as well. So you can have very different kind of vibes in your models. When you're photographing these models, you should ask yourself a lot of questions. So how are you composing your background? Is it going to be in a plain setting, or is it going to have a nice background like this one does here? What color is the background? So for example, having a light colored model on a white background is going to differ very much from a dark colored background. And also, is there any texture? Also, if there's any texture to it, like this one here. When taking photographs of your model, I think this is probably about 90% of your work. So the more work that you put into composing the photograph, the less work it takes to edit it. And then therefore less time, I guess. As for taking a photo also with the type of camera, it doesn't really need to be that fancy. For me, using my phone and then editing those, that's also just fine. So when taking a photo, you might not also have like a huge fancy background. So for me, laying out a giant piece of paper, for example, this is one that I used for my construction one wall section model which I had to print out. So really just recycling pieces of paper to create a really nice background. My main pro tip is to have one long piece of paper rather than having two boards, so that you have a very seamless background. There is nothing like in the way. There's no like line in the background behind your model. And then also thinking about camera angles, what makes your model look the most unique and the most striking? So here is a range of photos that I took from a few models. Oh, one model here, and then this is another one on the end. Trying to like stick your camera in in a lot of different parts of your model, being super experimental and trying to show a range of different spaces, so you get a whole bunch of work from one model. Considering also like the placement, so things like is it towards the left or the right? An aerial perspective, or like from below to emphasize the height of a building that you've designed, or maybe even close up to like for example this last one, to emphasize the intimacy of this particular space. So these ones I would say are quite intimate, the third and the fifth one. Or the last one is more of like an aerial shot. You can show like site diagramming and stuff. So the tools and methods I use the most are listed here. I'll go through these at the end when I'm photoshopping my picture that I'm going to be doing. So while you're photoshopping your model, some of the things that you can do are, first of all, cleaning up the background and fixing up any mistakes on your model, as well as changing up the lighting and effects. So this is basically anything that you can't fix in real life, you basically fix in your photos. And then finally, maintaining the consistency for a set of models. This might not make sense right now, but it will in a bit. So some examples that I can show you are photoshopping out the background. So this is me taking a photo of my model, and obviously my paper isn't big enough for it to span the whole way. So I'll be photoshopping that out, and also changing the lighting, and also like things like getting rid of the shadows, and making it a very beautiful model in the end. Another thing that you can consider, this model here was made during the lockdown season during COVID, and I run out of model making materials, so you can end up doing things like photoshopping the base of your model, as I have done right here, and making it, I guess it makes it look a lot more expensive because of the thickness of that piece of wood at the bottom. You can also do things like photoshopping people in, and also if you run out of plants, you can do the same thing. And it looks more polished as well. Moving on. So earlier I talked about having the consistency in your models. You can even do this to your renders if you want to have like that consistency. But here I have three completely different models, especially when they're done in different materials. You can put like a grayscale filter on them, and that makes them a lot more cohesive, and none of them really stand out to you, so that all of them read as one. Does that make sense? And therefore it's a lot more consistent. Yeah, a lot more consistent. And then finally, how to incorporate the ideas that you've shown in your model into a presentation. So you can do things like creating some very unique renders. So for example, not all of, so as I've shown here, I've done quite, these are quite complicated models, I would say. You can have very basic models as I've done here. They're very simple. And what I've done is taken one and drawn lines around them to really emphasize the shape of it. And then added trees and all these other different structures, as well as people, to create a setting that this kind of makeshift building would sit in. It's a very quick and dirty way of creating a render, especially if it's something that you can't model in 3D. It's a very cheap way, especially for things like Studio 4, which will come in handy quite a lot. In this, you can also experiment with the color of lines, either like black or white here at the top, to create really different types of pictures. And then also you can do things like showing your process. So for example, creating a bunch of quick small models and then placing them together This is so that your tutor can understand that you've thought about how you've gotten from point A, which is like general massing and stuff, all the way to your final design. It's this way of thinking, of doing things, shows your tutor that you've thought about the spaces um, rather than in just in plan and section. It's a very, it's a lot more 3D way of showing things. That makes sense. Yes. So for example, I really like doing a lot of small process models and putting them together to show the process from beginning all the way to end. Yeah. So another thing I like to do is to take aerial photos of especially my site models. It's I often find that it's a lot more effective than just a normal plan because first of all, I would say it's quite pretty, and also it's a lot more of a unique way of presenting things. It's not as 2D as like a normal line work plan is, and also it allows for a lot more contrast as well when you've annotated things on top, because because the annotations are quite 2D while the model itself is 3D. That also makes sense. Yeah. Um, Also, coming closer to the end, you can also show things like design strategies. So on here on the left, I would say is quite a normal model that I've taken a photo of. And it shows some things, but you don't really notice them as much. And then towards the right here, I've annotated things, and you can show things like not only things like sunlight, like also privacy, as well as things like connections between different spaces. Yeah. And finally, it's uh, finally I've got a few photos that I've done, and I've basically photoshopped people in, and also some trees as well, especially for the parts I have had it modeled on this side. Um, yeah, so it's basically also a substitute for renders, and it's also something that you can build on. Yeah. So now basically I'm also going to show you my workflow. I'm going to be photoshopping this picture that I've done here, and I'll show you how to do that on Photoshop to get this picture here. So just give me 2 minutes. I'll just switch the stream over so you guys can see my screen. All right. You guys can see my screen and everything. Oh, can you guys see Photoshop? Jared?
Yeah, we can see your desktop. Is that if that's what you're saying?
Yeah. Can you see
Yes.
Photoshop open?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I don't know if others
Yeah.
can, but
Okay. All right. So, basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to basically be going from this all the way to this, and I'll show you guys a few tips and tricks on how I do things. So this is the original photo that I took, and my first step is obviously I'm going to duplicate this, so you can go Control J or you can right click, and there should be a duplicate, but I can't find that, so Control J. And then I'm going to lock this one. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do now after that is I'm going to go around and select all of the background with the magic wand tool, which is shortcut W, I think. Yeah. And I'm going to have everything on a tolerance of perhaps 25. So up here, you can change the tolerances so you can select different things. So Shift W is what I'm going to do. And I'll just quickly do this. Oops. Do all of this for you guys. So you can see the quick process of doing all of these. So I'm going to select all of that too. So I've got all of the white here in the background selected, and I'm going to create a new layer by going Control Shift N, and I'll just type this as background. And then I am going to use layer mask. I'm just assuming that everyone knows most of the basics here from the last tutorial. If there's any questions, I'll come around them at the end. So here I've got the layer mask, and I'm going to paint all of this. I'm just going to paint this in just a bright blue for now, just so I can see where I've painted. So by doing this, you can see that I've missed a whole bunch of spots here. So right now I'm going to turn this off, and actually I might turn that on. And I'm going to select all of these parts in here, which I haven't selected. You don't need to go through all of these because in the end, you're not going to see all of this detail, but it's a lot more noticeable for these little bigger parts that I'm selecting, these bigger parts that I'm selecting right now. So Shift W to select all of them. And then I'm going to click over here on this mask, not this one here. And I'm going to go Control I. So this switches them back over again. And then I'm going to go Control D and unselect all of them. So here I've basically selected everything. Now what's missing is this part up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go a Lasso Tool. And I'm just going to select all of these, probably around here. Cleaning all of that up. And I'm going to paint, I'm going to also let that mask go through by painting this part in white so that it shows through. Oops. And I'm going to go G for the paint bucket and painting all of that white. So now I've basically got everything here selected, and I think I also want all of this up here as well. All of this space up here selected as well. And there we go. Cleaning all of that up. Oops. There we go. And after that, I'm going to change this because this blue was just so we could see where I was painting. Going to turn that white. That makes sense. So right now I've got basically a layer which covers all of this. So now you can see the shadows. So to make it less 2D in the background, I still actually want some of these shadows to show, but I still don't want all of this. So I'm going to duplicate all of this here. I'm going to duplicate this layer and let this part show through. It's a little bit of a complicated process sometimes. And then use my brush tool and, my erase tool and erase all of this out. So I'm only going to show this part here. And that. And then after that, I'll turn this layer back on, but have it at a lower opacity. And that should be about it. So as you can see, this part actually doesn't match. I don't know if Discord shows it quite well, but I'm going to change this layer. I'm bringing these little muzzle. Okay. So going to do that there and turn that into that shade so that they match a lot better. I'm not sure if Discord shows it that well, but depending on the color of your screen, that hopefully does show. And then you're going to use the erase tool just to blend this out a little bit. As you can see over here, that you can kind of see this line in the background. to just erasing it out, just so it matches it again. If you can see spots over here, where there's the little checkered parts, you can basically create a layer on the bottom, which is just white so that no one sees, and then dragging this to the bottom. All right, so now that we have the background all sorted out, we should now fix up the colors on this model. So for me, I usually change things like the brightness on the contrast. So this is quite an easy part, and also the hue and saturation. So depending on how you like to do things, so either turning up or down the saturation, depending on your style. For me, I like to turn it down slightly and turn the lightness up a little bit more. So the trick comes in when you have multiple pictures to edit. So this is just one, but oftentimes when you're taking photos and presenting models, you'll have like maybe over 10 pictures that you need to edit. So for example, I have a set of five models, which I have to edit. And I want to edit all of these. So I'll let Photoshop open all of these up first. And as you can see, they're all different like colors because of the lighting of when I took these photos. So what I'm going to do here is basically, you can basically fix all of the backgrounds of these models individually, but then after that you can kind of add what is like a filter. So basically every edit that you make creates a single layer. You might have a bunch of different adjustments, like all of these filters, which you might play around with. These two are the basics that I've shown you guys today. So with these, you can Control G to create one group in this. And I'm going to call this group My Filter for models. And inside here, I can basically copy and paste, so Control C, and then alter these ones by Control V, and you can basically add the exact same filter in between all of these. So it's just like a mass changing of all of them. And then you can edit them individually after that in case it doesn't actually work for that particular picture. So for this one, you might have to turn down the lightness. Yeah, so that was pretty much my workflow for how to Photoshop models. Hope that wasn't too fast for you guys. And if there was any more questions, feel free to ask. But yeah, that was pretty much my presentation all done. Thanks, guys. Was there any questions? Was there anything anyone wanted me to show? I'm gonna head up to discussion. We're all good. So if there's no more questions, I think that's done. We're all good for today. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming along.
That was
yeah, it was a very quick.
very good. It was quick,
It was
yeah, but it's nice and short and get to the point.
Yeah, it's a nice and short presentation. if there's anything anyone wanted me to show or wanted to go through again, just let me know. And yeah, because that was pretty short. Photoshopping isn't the hardest thing in the world. Yeah, take good photos. If there's any, I'll be uploading this presentation afterwards. So if there's anything that I skimmed over pretty fast, you guys will be able to see. And also this presentation is also recorded and uploaded onto our YouTube channel at UNSW Architecture Society. Just a quick promo as well. Tomorrow we have our Cox Architecture talk running from 8:30 onwards. Yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.